Thank you all. Welcome. It's a privilege to talk today to creatives, to artists, to academicians, economists, policymakers. It's a very diverse and unique crowd. It's a privilege, but also a challenge, right? So I usually talk to a much more boring audience of economists. So I'm going to try to keep it as less boring as possible. Okay, that's my promise to you. And I'm going to try to touch base on something that will hopefully talk to everybody here in this audience, to the policymakers, to the government sector, to private sector, to artists, to people who define themselves as learners and as teachers, right? Before I start, a quick anecdote. I'm actually betraying my own kind right now. On the other side of Istanbul today, there's another conference that just started. It's called Turkish Economic Association. All of the Turkish economists are there. And my colleague, my friend, and my neighbor, Daron Acemoğlu, is making a talk around this time, a little later over there. So there is an invasion of people from Boston in Istanbul right now making talks. Okay, let me start my talk with an anecdote. I'm going to take you somewhere in Istanbul. We're going to start in Istanbul. I have been in Boston since 1993. This is 32 years. That's why I'm also speaking in English to you today. And even though Boston is my hometown now, Istanbul has and is always my first love. And I like to connect my cities together and whatever I can do as an academician, as a professor. So I thought, when the opportunity presented itself, that I could design a program to bring MBA students, these are international MBA students, from Boston to Istanbul. Who has children here in the audience? Can I see hands if you have kids? Like, okay. So if you have kids, you probably know Hasbro as one of the biggest companies that makes toys. Monopoly is by Hasbro. Hasbro's owner resides in Boston. He's a very eccentric businessman. His name is Ellen Hassenfeld. He said, to understand an economy, you cannot just look at the macro trends, and you also have to go there, visit the country itself. You have to understand the culture, you have to understand the people, you have to understand art and the creative nature of that country. He said, I did that way back with China when nobody wanted to go to China, and that's why and how I built this amazing company that's called Hasbro. He's getting older, he has a lot of money, so he said, I'm going to donate X amount of money, so let's not throw numbers around, to my former university. I was a professor at Brandeis University by then. And he said, but you have to take the students somewhere where it's going to be the next rising star of the global economy. And my job was to convince him that it's Istanbul. So my dean said, okay, go talk to him so he gives us the money, and then we're going to start the Istanbul program. So I met with him. As soon as I said I'm from Istanbul, he said, oh, why don't we take the students to Istanbul? You know, after we had a very pleasant time with him, I went back to my dean. I said, it took a long time and a lot of convincing, but yes, we are going to Istanbul. And I did that for 7 years. Okay? For 7 years, I took 30 MBA students from Boston to Istanbul, and we are like the United States. The MBA students are from every country that you can imagine. 30 students from probably 24, 25 different countries. And yes, when we came to Istanbul, we visited the Arçelik factories, the
İşte
Koç
Arçelik
Holdings, the
fabrikasına
big
gittik, Koç
banks and
Holding'e gittik,
what have
büyük
you.
bankalara gittik.
But
Aklınıza ne gelirse.
what was special
Fakat
for me
benim
and
için özel olan konu ki bugünle de ilgili ve alakalı olan programın bir gününde bu programın bir gününü Cafer Ağa Medresesi'ne vakfetmiştim. Cafer Ağa Medresesi hani bilmiyorsanız şimdi yabancılar için söylüyorum, medrese bir okuldur, zaten okulun esmidir ve Cafer Ağa Medresesi 1559'da kurulmuştur. Yani İstanbul'un fethinden ki bugün tarihidir aslında 100 yıl sonra ve Ayasofya'ya bitişiktir ve 1989 yılında da bir geleneksel Türk ve Osmanlı sanatları merkezine dönüştürülmüştür. İşte dediğim gibi Cafer Ağa Medresesi'ne götürdüm ve öğrencileri Cafer Ağa Medresesi'ne dedim ki 30 öğrenci getireceğim. Burayı bir günlüğüne bana ayırır mısınız, rezerve eder misiniz dedim. Anlaştık. Bir günlüğüne anlaştık ve burası bir işletme fakültesi öğrencilerin dünya çapından gelen ve işte mesela Ebru sanatı öğreneceklerdi, Çin'i, hat sanatı öğreneceklerdi. Ki zamanlarını ayırıp bunun sabır gerektiğini öğreneceklerdi ve aynı zamanda kültürün anlaşılması gerektiğini öğreneceklerdi. O gün sona erdiğinde herkes kendi eserlerini yaptılar. Herkes birer Ebru denemesi yaptı ve orada büyülü, sihirli bir şey oldu. Ne olduğunu söyleyeyim. Bu programın kurucusu da aynı zamanda Hassenfeld, o da katılıyordu ve bir parça kültürü anlamaya başladılar. Biraz zihniyeti anlamaya başladılar ve bu geleneksel ve yaratıcı nasıl bir arada var olabiliyor ki var oluyor da Türkiye'de bunu gördüler. Bu benim en sevdiğim yerlerden birisiydi. Öğrencilerimle ki burada fotoğrafta bazılarını görüyorsunuz. Önce Ebru sanatını öğreniyorlar. Ondan sonra da kendi başlarına deniyorlar. Ve burada yarattıkları eserlerden bir örnek görüyoruz fotoğrafta. Ve ben bugün sizlere 6 farklı konudan bahsedeceğim. Bu Ebru bunlardan biri değil. Ebru girizgahtı. Bir numaralı konu muhtemelen benim aslında konuşma konusunda kendimi en yetkin hissettiğim kişilerden birisiyim bu konuda. Çünkü bana açılış konuşması dediklerinde konuşacağım konular başka yerde bulabileceğiniz konular olsun istemedim. Özgün bir şekilde yetkinliğim olsun sizlerle paylaşabileceğim konular. Ben sizlerle paylaşma konusunda özgün yetkinliğim nedir? İsmim Can Erbil, soyadım Erbil. Zaten soyadımı sizinle özgün bir şekilde mesela paylaşabilirim. Benim amcam Türkiye'nin bilinen ressamlarından birisidir. İstanbul'un şair ressamı olarak bilinir.
He's
Ve
86 years young. I think he is in his mind and in his creative spirit, he is younger than definitely me and I think many people in the audience. And he continues to amaze me, inspire me in many different ways. I'm going to start in the reverse order. So this happened about 2 months ago in Istanbul. It's a unique collaboration with a sports club. For those of you who are outside of Istanbul, we have 3 major big sports clubs. 4 in Istanbul. One of them is Fenerbahçe. For those of you who are rooting for the other teams, congratulations for the championship of Galatasaray. So there's, I'm not promoting any team here, but my uncle resides on the Anatolian side, on the Asian side of Istanbul, and he is a dedicated fan of this sports team, and they decided to do something unique. My uncle paints Istanbul usually from aerial photography, and teaming up with this sports team, they had drone imagery from the stadium of the soccer club, football club, And my uncle created 8 paintings, 1,923 prints for the sports club. And it was a unique event, bringing together sports, arts, and yes, economics. There is also a big part of economic dimension of this project. This is him. He was supposed to be here on this podium with me today. Unfortunately, he's recovering. He had a health emergency about a month ago. He's in good health right now. He's in his residence in Bodrum recovering, but this is him opening this exhibition about a month ago. This is one of the drone images in Istanbul and his famous birds of Istanbul. And this is just one of the last innovations, collaborations, something creative that brings sports together with arts. But in 2018, this is 7 years ago, for the first time, when I have visited Istanbul, I saw him playing with virtual reality. Mind you, he is still, by that time, in his late 70s. Many people don't even know what virtual reality is. He had a piece where you could actually fly over Istanbul, like one of his birds, on his painting. This was almost 10 years ago, when virtual reality was not mainstream. Fast forward a little bit from the 8 years closer today. Last year, he had another innovation called Neonist. Neon, with neon lights. He had paintings and creations of Istanbul, and the entire exhibit was on NFTs. So now he is collaborating with blockchain and with finance. All of a sudden, again, art meeting different domains and different professions. Right? There's a lot that he does. Every time I come here, he innovates something new. I don't know what he is going to come up with next. He has a very extensive tapestry collection that many people don't know. These are done in Iran mostly. They are all silk tapestry, his own paintings. In my opinion, some of them are so amazing, even better than some of the paintings. I'm like always amazed with those. If you want to hear more about some of the innovations, there's a new Netflix documentary about it. So I don't want to talk too much, but I think this is something that I can uniquely bring to this gathering, beginning of gathering, as a source of inspiration for me. One last anecdote about my uncle, and then don't worry, for those of you who are from my profession, I'm going to talk about macroeconomics too, and we're going to get there. Way back, this is more than 25 years ago, when my wife first time visited Istanbul with me, she's not Turkish, she visited my uncle's atelier, and she said, "This is amazing, this is great." And just by talking, she said, some of this could be great as stained glass. Next year when we visited, my uncle had a stained glass atelier. So age is not a limit. If we actually want to continue to create, I think that also is something that keeps us younger. Okay, so let's move a little bit from Istanbul, from close to me. Actually, we're going to stay close to me, but I'm going to move you somewhere else. Again, what can I share with you that is unique to my own experience? Boston. So I've been in Boston for the last 32 years, and Boston has changed immensely, especially in the last 10, 15 years. It became one of the innovations hubs of the entire world, not only United States. How? Why? Can we replicate this in Istanbul? Can we replicate this for creative industries? What happened? Firstly, you know, in and around Boston, there are so many universities, so academia. When I say venture capital, startups, what comes to mind? Give me one word. Actually, two words. Venture capital, startups. If you're a startup, where would you like to be? Exactly. You want to be in Silicon Valley, right? Why? Because when you sneeze in Silicon Valley, somebody gives you $1 million. Like they're like, here, $1 million, right? So Silicon Valley has been the center, epicenter of funding for many startups. It is changing. New York is number 2. Boston became close number 3, took over actually New York. We are number 2 now, and actually rising. Getting closer to Silicon Valley in a different way. We are not necessarily one-on-one competing with Silicon Valley, but the nature of what's happening in Boston is different. If you sneeze in Boston, they say Gesundheit. Çok yaşa. They don't give you $1 million. How do you get 10 million, 20 million, $50 million in Boston? You have to have the backup of somebody from Harvard, somebody from MIT, somebody from Boston College. You have to have some substance. You have to have some academia, some science that is actually backing up whatever your vision and your creation is. And that's what we have. We have plenty of that in Boston, but it's not the only one. I have also colleagues here who know what I'm talking very well. I saw the name of Alperen in the program. I worked with him in Boston. He actually knows this even better than I do. What happens, what makes the, and here's the keyword that I want you to take home with you. If you forget everything that I say today, the keyword is ecosystem. So what makes the Boston ecosystem so unique is that yes, we have academia, yes, we have entrepreneurs, but there is more that comes together and makes this a unique, a magical elixir. Okay? What is that? First, the culture, the mindset. It's open to innovation. It's open to risk-taking. It doesn't really punish you, or you don't have to be embarrassed if your startup doesn't make it. Actually, it's considered to be an experience, so you get more money. There is also willingness of academia to help as mentors. So you don't only get the backup of science, but you get a continuous support. In the last 2 years, I have been on board of 4 AI startups. They enjoy to have me because I'm telling them what the macroeconomic trends are so they can position themselves. I enjoy being there because I am learning amazing things about AI that nobody else knows. I have the first step. There are many people like me in Boston who would like to continue to support this collaboration. What else? What else do you need? You need venture capital. More and more capital is going to Boston. What else? Something that actually appeals to the policymakers here, our friends from Ankara. You don't know that, but that's one of my stories that I will share with you. The background of MIT, the background story of MIT has a lot to do with our guests from Ankara. Government, the presence and the support of government is one of the unique ingredients of Boston, still today. I'm going to explain the story in more detail about how MIT became MIT. It didn't happen magically, right? It happened with this ecosystem. Okay, great. Why am I telling you about Boston ecosystem? Because when I started there as a PhD student in 1993, Boston did not have this ecosystem. So it was built with a vision, with a lot of support. By the time when I was a student, when you went to Seaport, which is something as beautiful almost as what you see outside, you would be scared. Because Seaport is somewhere only the Italian mafia would go to drop a dead body. Today, you cannot buy, I cannot buy, I'm sure some of you can, even a studio for less than $2 million in the same place. The place has changed immensely. The ecosystem has created hubs for biotech. Biotech became one of the biggest industries of Boston. The number one footprint of innovation in the world is about 18 minutes away from my home. If I drive like an American, if I drive like a Turkish person, it's like 14 minutes, right? It's in Cambridge. It's called Cambridge Innovation Center. It has the world's most innovation footprint, meaning the property rights, patents, startups per square meter. It is the most condensed place. Again, this did not happen just by chance. The former president of the United States gave more than $1 billion to keep that area, Kendall Square and Cambridge Innovation Center, an innovation hub. The government support has been always part of the puzzle in the ecosystem of Boston. Okay, so let me see. Who knows where this is? Anybody? Like these buildings that look a little bit crooked. This is MIT campus. This is the Stata building, built by a very famous architect on this very same design. The design is unique. There is no 90-degree angle in this building, right? So I want to take you now in Boston to MIT, and I want to show you in this building a particular installation. It's a radar. What does this radar have to do? Okay. Before MIT became MIT, MIT was an engineering school, a good school, but not the MIT of today. It was a regional school. It's the Second World War. Britain is under the Blitz from Germany. It's not going well. The German U-boats don't allow anything to pass. They cannot get food. They cannot get anything that they need to win this war. They are starting to build this technology that's called radar, but they don't have the research and development to actually bring it so that they can use it, right? Develop it so that they can use it. Something really interesting happens. UK decides to share this with the United States. They say, okay, we are going to tell you whatever we have so far. Can you please finish and develop this? And what happens is the US military decides to give one of the tenders to MIT. They said, okay, here is the funding. Build us something so we can detect these U-boats, so we can actually stop this blockage. And that changes the entire history of not only MIT, but also Boston, right? So MIT builds this, what's called RAD lab, not RAD, D, RAD lab, and they built the first radar, the very one that you see on this image. That radar becomes one of the game changers of the Second World War. Now we can detect the U-boats of Germany. Now we can detect the enemy airplanes, the kamikazes. So it changes the entire, actually, direction of the war, the Second World War. After it is won, this radar continues to actually benefit the entire system. I just flew from Boston yesterday. The air travel, as we know it, we owe it to the radar. It actually starts a brand new industry. Not only that, all the professors, all this brain power that was in this lab after the war, they spin off, that's the word, usually from the universities. If you do very well, they kick you out in a nice way. They give you money. They say, okay, you're doing a great job. Go spin out of the university now. So they started the first computer industry seeds, again, in the Boston area. So many industries actually spun off of MIT with the help of the government, military. Up to this day, MIT gets still a big lion's share of the support from the government and especially from the military. Something similar is also happening in Turkey. We also have a very fast-growing drone industry with support, again, with military. But this is what I want to underline. Our unique audience here, policymakers, innovators, scientists, academicians. If we get together, if we support each other, amazing things happen. I know this. It happened in my backyard. MIT today, we have to also give a shout out to Daron Acemoğlu again. He won the Nobel Prize in Economics this year, finally. They should have given it to him like 10 years ago, but he was too young. And I'm thinking that Canan will also get it in the future, Canan Dağdeviren, and her amazing innovations in the Media Lab of MIT. These are what changed Boston in the last 20, 25 years, made it a unique ecosystem. Okay. Do we have something similar here? Let's travel back to Turkey. About 10 years ago, I was asked, no, actually 14 years ago, I was asked to come up with a report for the World Bank. And they wanted to focus on trade of Turkey, but something unique on services trade. They said, is there a potential for Turkey to actually gain some ground in services trade? And I brought private sector, government, and the World Bank together around the table on 3 different industries. The first one was education. The second one was health. And these are all, think about it, health tourism, education tourism, and the third one was the TV series. The TV series skyrocketed, we know that. We have a lot of foreign students now coming to Turkish universities. I think that's also a success story. And you know, the health tourism, especially in some niche areas, like hair transplants, right? When people tell me in Boston, I'm going to go to Istanbul for a hair transplant, I tell them it's a bold move. So people have been thinking and talking about what can happen in Turkey. But then people also ask me about, so how about the economy, the Turkish economy? It's volatile. So can we invest? Can we trust? My answer to them is a little bit of the history of the Turkish economy, right? So I grew up here in Turkey, and when I grew up, we always had high inflation. Always. When I say high inflation, it's between 40% and 80% inflation going on. So we did not have the highest inflation in the world, but we have constant high inflation. It's like you have a fever, it doesn't kill you, but you just run around with high fever the entire time, right? So what does high inflation do to an economy? I'm not talking about like what's happening in the United States or what happened in the United States. They have double-digit inflation for 2 years. They're like, our hair is on fire. They think the world is going to end. I'm talking about 40 years of high inflation. What happens is it changes the entire mindset of the economic agents. Because you don't have another chance. To survive, you learn how to move in a foggy weather. It's fog. You cannot see the future, but you still have to go on. You are not paralyzed. You don't stay where you are. So in another World Bank report, when we looked at what is Turkey's competitive advantage, what does Turkey have that other nations don't have, actually, we did not have the highest competitiveness in many sectors, but we had the highest adaptability score and resilience. But, you know, 13 dakika. Son 3 dakika. Okay, thank you. Great. We had high resilience in Turkey, right? So I think this is something also unique. I'm going to, in the last 3 minutes, I'm going to bring you back to Cafera Medresesi where we started. As you know, Islam discouraged realistic portraits. So did it actually stop art? No. It actually flourished different types of art. So at the end of that one day, with my students, my business students, I tell them, if you have to understand Turkey, you have to understand that the Turkish people can adapt. If you cannot impress you in one way, then you find another way to impress yourself. You made a skirt, you cannot sell the skirt. You made it to a pair of pants, you sell the pants. If there is high inflation, you learn how to operate in a high inflation for a long time. This reflex is absent in many other countries. When they actually see the crisis, they are paralyzed. That's one of our big advantages. It has to do with creative industries. We have to be creative. Even in something as boring as economics, we have been creative for a long time in this country. So with that, I want to bring it all together. And I want to open the forum for the rest of these 2 days for thinking outside of the box, thinking about how we can get this ecosystem, this unique ecosystem here in Istanbul, how we can create bridges with anywhere else, how we can actually take advantage of the retreat of hyper-globalization that I didn't get to talk, but we are now becoming more regional, okay? So instead of outsourcing, we are friend sourcing, which may be an advantage for us, right? AI, don't be scared of AI. Or everybody in academia is scared of AI. I love it. I am building my own Herbal bot. The Herbal bot is going to use my 28 years of teaching notes, my exams. My students will ask a question. It will only answer from my material, nothing else. It will personalize exam questions for students, right? You can do many, many amazing things. Yes, we are at an era of change and also opportunity. Thank you, and welcome. Thank you,
Hocam
Özlem.
çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Ben teşekkür
Yaratıcı
ederim.
ekonomiye dair bu konuşmanız için ağzınıza sağlık.
Sağ ol.
Çok teşekkür
Ben
ediyoruz.
teşekkür ederim.
Değerli konuklar, şimdi Inspire Yaratıcı Ekonomi Zirvesi'nin önemli başlıklarından birine geçeceğiz. Küreselleşen ekonomide yaratıcı ve kültürel alanların dönüşümü başlıklı bu oturumda yaratıcı sektörlerin küresel ölçekte nasıl dönüştüğünü, küresel politikaların nasıl şekillendiğini ve bu değişim sürecinde Türkiye'deki örnekleri hep birlikte değerlendireceğiz. Bu oturumun moderatörlüğünü Sanayi ve Teknoloji Bakanlığı Genel Müdür Yardımcısı Sayın Mustafa Caner Meydan yapacak. Buyurunuz efendim. Hoş geldiniz. Buyurunuz. Şimdi panelistlerimizi de takdim etmek istiyorum. UNESCO uzmanı Almanya Merkez İF Araştırma Danışma Kurulu üyesi Sayın Anupama Sekar. Thank you so much. Kültür politikaları uzmanı, Liverpool Üniversitesi Kültürel Sermaye Enstitüsü Direktörü Sayın Doktor Beatrice Garcia. Ekonomist, Ankara Sosyal Bilimler Üniversitesi öğretim üyesi ve UNESCO Türkiye Milli Komisyonu üyesi Sayın Profesör Doktor Barış Alparslan. Güzel bir oturum diliyorum. Söz sizin. Buyurunuz efendim.
Kıymetli katılımcılar, ben de herkesi anlıyorum. Bildiğiniz üzere 2 günlük Kreatif Ekonomi Zirvemiz de çeşitli paneller olacak. Bu paneller serimizin ilk paneli. Burada 3 tane kıymetli panelistimiz mevcut. Buradaki öncelikle panelistlerimizin kendilerini tanıtmalarını, daha sonra da bu konuda edindikleri tecrübelerden yola çıkarak küreselleşen ekonomide kreatif ekonomi bağlantısını kurmalarını rica edeceğim. Sözlerime Anupama Hanım'la başlamak istiyorum. Lütfen buyurunuz. Her panelistimize ilk oturumda 15'er dakikalık bir süre vermek istiyorum. Daha sonra mevcut durumdaki değerlendirmelerden sonra ikinci panelimizde de inşallah geleceğe dair öngörülerimiz, beklentilerimiz neler onu konuşacağız. Genel değerlendirmelerden sonra panelimizi kapatacağız. Çok teşekkür ediyorum katılımlarınız için. Buyurun lütfen.
Thank you very much. Am I audible? Yes. My name is Anupama Sekar. I work in the arts as an arts manager, particularly looking at international cultural cooperation. I have been working for the last 10 years with UNESCO as an independent expert, training various governments, doing research, and also sitting on the selection committee of the International Fund for Cultural Diversity, which is one of UNESCO's few funds that directly supports the creative industries in the global south. I work as a bridge between policy and those working at the grassroots, artists, cultural managers. I'm originally from India. I live in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, and as with most of us, work internationally. It's an absolute pleasure to be back in Istanbul and to be part of this forum. I'm going to, in response to your question, I'm going to share a few reflections from my own experience about cultural production in today's highly globalized world. Also highly globalized market system. So where do arts and culture fit in here? And in particular, how are various countries and governments protecting local cultural expressions while at the same time ensuring global participation in the global market, as well as competitiveness? It's a very tricky balance. The risks and opportunities of globalization is something we're all familiar with. The opportunities are many. There's opportunity for market expansion. There is now demand for diverse cultural products outside our own borders, which means new audiences. There is digital democratization. Today we see independent creators, small cultural enterprises completely bypass the traditional gatekeepers. Our keynote speaker, Professor Erbel, just mentioned NFTs. You don't need any curator or gatekeeper for NFTs. TikTok, YouTube, young emerging independent creators are basically everywhere. Countries are also harnessing the power of the cultural and creative industries as soft power. I think today it's common knowledge that various countries have used globally successful export products to build a completely new image, influence, and visibility for themselves. K-pop is an obvious example. India's film industry is another one, though it's not very much supported by the government. It's really working on a business model. Nigeria's film industry is another example which tells local stories, but somehow with a very strong global reach. And of course, being here in Istanbul, I have to say, Turkish dramas, especially your historical dramas. I started watching one of them, and 3 days later, until the 100th episode was over, you can't take your eyes off that. So, Magnificent Century, Paitahed Abdul Hamid, fantastic. It gives you, and I think in there, I would say very much that Turkey has also used it as an instrument of soft power by sort of riding on its Ottoman heritage to become a cultural superpower yet again. So I think there are many opportunities, but there are also huge risks. We're talking about cultural homogenization. We're talking about loss of local cultural sovereignty. You want your stories to be told, but is there space for that? We've always been talking about market concentration. You have the big multinationals who are controlling distribution. And who controls distribution? Controls monetization. So where is the space for smaller players? We're also always afraid of the huge cultural exporters. Will my film industry be swamped by another big film industry from outside? I think that's a very genuine concern. In our age of AI, I think a big concern has also been intellectual property rights. Local creators can be undercompensated, even exploited, if there are no legal frameworks to protect their pay, their intellectual property, copyrights, royalties, etc. And I think we're still living in a world of unequal access, whether this is access to digital infrastructure, financing, or to markets in the global north. And I think this is something that creatives in the global south particularly face. So in this context, given that there is so much of talk about cultural and creative industry strategies in many parts of the world, how can countries create that delicate but important balance between promoting their local cultural expressions, retaining their authenticity, not making just a spectacle of them, and at the same time gaining some economic value and staying competitive in a global market? First and foremost, I would say that enabling cultural policies are central. There is a place for public policy here. We see, for instance, in some countries, there are quota systems for local content. France has this, Korea has this, Canada has this, including for indigenous and multiple language programming. In some countries, there are public broadcasters and cultural institutions that really push national cultural content. And I think what is very important is that there is space among all this economic dialogue also for those artistic or cultural products that are actually not commercial, that will actually fail if you throw it out in the market without any support. So we need to have a balance between grants and subsidies for those cultural products that are not commercial, not market-oriented, but that will create a diversity in the market. And on the other hand, provide, say, loans, investment in those other products that are more commercial, that are probably scalable. So I think cultural policies, there is a place for that, and it's quite encouraging to see countries in many parts of the world really have and build and develop a cultural industries sort of strategy, including export and internationalization strategies. Secondly, and again coming back to what Professor Erbel was saying earlier, the key word is ecosystem. Very often we look at artists separately, infrastructure completely separately, cultural institutions, museums, there in another corner, and then you have your market and audiences in another corner. So they're all rather isolated, seen as isolated sectors, but what we need to see is that they are all interrelated. If we want a successful, competitive, if we want to be successful and competitive in the global market, we also need to have a very strong local ecosystem. And for me, an amazing example in this regard is Dakar in Senegal. Dakar is known for the Dakar Biennale. It's also based for Pan-African hip-hop. So there is strong local support for the culture, but it also draws international art audiences and just tourists who are curious about the arts. So I think this balance and the local rootedness is actually quite important, sometimes even ironically so if you want to internationalize. Without that, you're going to lose your authenticity of your culture. You're just beginning to create a spectacle, self-exotic image to sell to someone else. And when we talk about the ecosystem, I would say there are two things that are particularly key. One would be that we can no longer think of culture as something that only a Ministry of Culture or a cultural institution or a cultural arts council does. I think cross-sectoral collaboration with education, with trade, with digital policy, with urban planning is absolutely critical. And now, I suppose, also with technology, with the rise of AI. A second area is intellectual property rights protection. Artists deserve to be paid fair prices, deserve to be paid whether they work analog or digital. Their intellectual property has to be protected through legal frameworks. And I think artists also have to be trained to understand that they need to protect their intellectual property, that they also need to monetize it, and how to do it not only in the national setup, but also how to do it internationally when their work is shown, consumed outside. And I think all of these areas coming together in an ecosystem is absolutely critical. We cannot not talk about digital. I think digital sovereignty and innovation is critical. Unless local creators have knowledge about digital and AI, unless they have upskilling opportunities, unless there is digital infrastructure, incubators, national platforms, it will be impossible for local creators to really harness the global digital economy. Last but certainly not the least, I think fair trade is absolutely critical. There are many international instruments such as UNESCO's 2005 Convention on the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expressions. It already offers us tools that countries that have ratified these conventions can use. And there are two particularly important mechanisms. One is cultural exception, which means that when countries are doing trade negotiations, they can actually say that I want my cultural goods and services to be seen a bit differently from commercial products. So France uses this very, very well to protect its film, its music, and all its cultural goods and services. The other is preferential treatment, and I think this is particularly useful for countries in the global south, where you ask for preferential treatment for the goods and services of your local creators to access global north markets. It's useful to get visas, which is often very difficult for artists working often informally as freelancers, They often find it very difficult to get even a visa to go to the global north. Preferential treatment clauses in international cultural cooperation will absolutely help local creators internationalize. And I think there are many examples around us which are superbly interesting. Each has taken a different trajectory. Korea is an obvious example. Today, we all know K-pop, Korean music, Korean film, Korean television, soap operas, gaming, animation. And this is because Korea has a very integrated policy. On one hand, they have a contents agency, so they have strong push to export their contents. They also have a 40% in their cinemas, you have to show only Korean films, so there's a quota there to protect also Korean films in local audiences. And what I find particularly interesting about the Korean model is that they have managed to keep that unique balance between economic value, global export, and cultural authenticity, because Korean culture is very, whatever you see, whether it's a movie, a soap opera, it's so rooted in a particular Korean aesthetic, in the Korean language. And so they have managed that very delicate sort of balance. The other interesting example for me is Nigeria's film industry, because it tells local stories, it tells it in local languages, but it has become an export powerhouse across Africa and the diaspora. It's the second largest film industry by volume, I'm told, so that's pretty big. And in doing all of this, and I think it has also played to this whole idea of soft power. It's not something that the government is doing, but by its sheer soft power, the Nigerian film industry, I think it has reframed African modernity, and it's also a symbol of a cultural Pan-Africanism, which I find very, very interesting. If you turn to Latin America and Colombia, we have the orange economy, providing lots of tax incentives in the last years to attract, to get, to build an economic sort of model. So I think the examples are many.